Check another box for Ohio State. This one on the road, this one at Wrigley Field. Another November win, and the last regular season road game of the season for Ohio State is a 31-7 decision over Northwestern. Maybe not their best performance overall of the year, but a comfortable win, and it moves them along to this critical 2-game stretch against Indiana and Michigan to close out the regular season. We'll get to that. That's Berm. I'm Austin. These are Snap Judgments on the podcast. We're going to talk more about this win over Northwestern, which the fan base traveled, brought the juice.
Definitely.
Wrigleyville was popping.
Definitely.
Big deal that maybe I made too much out of the turf. They did a great job here. Everything was safe. Ohio State does have some injury scares, but they had nothing to do with the turf. So Ryan Day called it a very business-like effort from Ohio State, and I think that's pretty apt.
Yeah, it felt almost to me like a carbon copy of last week's game against Purdue, with the notable exception that Ohio State didn't get a fourth quarter touchdown that wasn't needed, and then Purdue didn't score a touchdown on their second drive like Northwestern did because they botched a field goal. But it felt similar. I don't know that there's a lot to look at and feel really annoyed by, which is always, I think, the metric that I go into Snap Judgments. Like, am I annoyed?
I don't know. I came down here in the fourth quarter. You seemed a little annoyed.
I don't understand some decision making, like the 4th down and 3 play to the long ball to Carnell Tate with 5 minutes to go in the fourth. Didn't make a lot of sense to me because why have one receiver in a route and have it be 30 yards down the field? I don't know. But is there certainly... I think this is a play with your food type of day for Ohio State. Like, well, let's see if we can do this. I mean, there were a lot of reps for the younger guys on defense. I watched a play where Tyleik Williams was lined up at a wide 9 technique where he was basically like perpendicular to the line of scrimmage. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? But they got off the field on that play. If you're going to look at the first quarter and a half of this game when it was a game, the inability to get off the field on 3rd down is a problem for Ohio State. That has happened, and it wasn't just today. That's been a recurring thing throughout the year. So there has to be something sorted out there. And I guess if you try to extrapolate this performance to Indiana, which is going to run a similar style of offense, spread them out, you can run and pass. They do a lot of things. Northwestern doesn't do it particularly well, but kudos to them. They ran the ball hard today. Cam Porter did a nice job. The quarterback was accurate with the ball. Ohio State got after him pretty good. I mean, they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and he made plays. But offensively, this kind of felt like we'll just do whatever we want and get out of here type of game. And I think the frustration is that this game wasn't over with the first drive of the 3rd quarter like it probably should have been. Instead, Northwestern holds onto the ball for another 9 minutes or something like that. And Ohio State ends up kicking a field goal, and you're like, I don't love that. But, it's 31-7. You're heading into now like the new next season.
The real
season starts. And so you don't want to spend too much time laboring the point of like, well, this could have been better. Yeah, it could have been, but it's 31-7, and now you have Indiana, Michigan, Oregon if you take care of business next week. So that's where the focus has to go.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency, and maybe it's because it's mid-November that I feel differently about it, because I can think of 10 things immediately off the top of my head that we could nitpick, and we're going to talk about them definitely once we get back to Columbus. There's no doubt, because there's a massive game a week from now for Ohio State in the Horseshoe against Indiana. Get used to hearing that. Like that is the reality of the situation. But I think because we could talk about the cornerbacks and Northwestern not being afraid to throw, which has been a theme for several weeks in a row. We could talk about some of the execution offensively, and you mentioned the play calling and some of those short yardage, the 4th and 3, even Ryan Day punting from the 37-yard line. I think there are a bunch of things that pop into my mind, and if this was September, I would say, boy, how is that going to translate for this team later in the year? But you are now 9-1. You've played 10 games. We do have a very good idea what Ohio State looks like at its best. So if you have a game, and even this is different than 2 weeks ago against Nebraska, which was flat from the start and had issues popping up all over the place, or, you talk about a play with your food game like that. Was it? Oh, boy. I don't know.
That's how fast the season's going.
Okay. Anyway.
There's been 3 games since
then. A few games ago, let me correct myself on the fly. That one felt very different to analyze and to speculate what that means for it. I don't think that is how I leave Wrigley Field thinking about Ohio State today.
No, Ryan Day's assessment as far as just a professional win, that's what it felt like. The Nebraska game was a lethargic, nobody prepared for this. They came in, they just have had a tough time getting off the field on 3rd down. It happened last week against Purdue. It happened now. It happened against Nebraska. Did not happen against Penn State, ironically. But what Ryan Day also said in postgame is that what you did today really doesn't have any bearing on what you do next week or the week after. He said, yeah, you learn from things. And I guess if I have an overarching question/concern, it's like, are they learning from things on defense? Because I see the same mistakes being made on defense no matter who the competition is. And that's a bit of an issue for me. But you don't have to spend a lot of time watching Nebraska tape or Purdue tape or Northwestern tape to prepare for Indiana. Like, we've sort of mocked Ohio State saying it's about Ohio State, it's about Ohio State. This week's about Ohio State. Indiana is a good team. They are not as good as Ohio State. And so if you go into that game prepared, Ohio State should win without, I think, a whole lot of struggle.
But they're already favored by 10.
Right, so you're a double-digit favorite against the top 5 team. Like, that's a pretty big number. But you're going to have to clean some things up, and that's where I think Ryan Day and the coaching staff will take away from the Northwestern 31-7 win. Is like, wasn't great, still win by 24, still without any stress at all after the block punt by Gabe Powers, I think, who blocked it.
They gave it to David Adolph.
Really?
Yep. Caden Curry got in there, blew it up.
I knew Adolph and Powers were right there.
Gabe Powers.
Gabe Powers. But it felt a lot like last week. You get the one drive in the first quarter, then you get a short drive because of a block punt. And so it's like, okay, now all of a sudden it's 14. Then you get the ball back with 2 minutes to go in the half, and you find a way to score. And you're like, okay, now it's over. But that's not how you can just count on it going against a good team over these next few weeks. So the Buckeyes are going to have to figure out a way to stop themselves from being a little bit of a slow starter.
Yeah, and I think I did get into that mindset a little bit. I think there was a throw, this is the second drive for Northwestern, right over here into this end zone. Like, Jermaine Matthews gets beat just a little bit. And it's like, well, would Curtis Rourke have made that throw? Like, are they going to be made to pay for that? Does it, the play calling could be very different. I think, as you mentioned, Ohio State's trying to find some things out. Maybe some of the mistakes are similar, but they really seem intent. Can you do this blitz? Can you trust the coverage? Can you play enough man to man with Davis Nigmanosin and Denzel Burke out there? Does Jermaine Matthews continue to get more reps? How does that impact what you want to do with the pressure up front? I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it does feel like Jim Knowles has spent this last few weeks post-Penn State just like, well, let's throw everything out there and find out what sticks. But they're also doing it when you're saying, what does it mean for Indiana or Michigan after that? You're going to be doing it with JT Tuimola and Jack Sawyer way more than they have. So it's hard to evaluate that in a way that's like, what does Ohio State at its best look like? What do they have to work on? What are they not doing well enough? I mean, I don't think Northwestern is capable of revealing that.
No, but we are also able to look back 2 weeks in that Penn State game, which was probably offensively and defensively the best, in my opinion, the best coached game of the year by Ohio State. They were more prepared for Penn State than they've been for any other game this year. And I think the Oregon game, honestly, they were probably more prepared for Oregon than they, other than any game other than Penn State, in my opinion. Like,
offensively. I don't think they were defensively.
I think that you are. Well, I mean, I don't think you could count on Oregon going 8 for 8 on Denzel Burke in that game. Like, you had a plan. The plan sucked in retrospect, but I don't think it was a bad plan going in. It was saying, hey, we'll see if these guys can beat our DBs. And since then, everyone's been beating the DBs and the corners.
I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of the things that we know have changed in terms of simplifying one call, not looking to the sideline, lining up and letting Ohio State's athletes play, because pretty much any scheme with Ohio State's athletes is going to work more often than not. Yep. And that's true even against a team like Indiana. So I'm not trying to take exception what they coached a good game and they very well could have beat Oregon.
Yeah.
But there were defensive things that I think are, even on a day like today where they didn't execute great and they were struggling to get off the field on third down, it was like, well, who's out there? What are they trying to do? And I feel like it's very conscientious about adding to the arsenal for the last couple of weeks in a way that a month and a half ago I didn't feel like.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I agree. That's why I'm saying I don't know how to go into the Indiana game with any thought other than they'll be ready to play.
Sure.
Like these last few weeks have just felt, the Nebraska game, the Purdue game, this one, have felt like experimentation, which I don't know that we've ever really seen Ohio State in the middle of the season be able to do this like they have in these last couple of weeks.
Right.
No worries. We'll be done in about 2 minutes. We're going to be done in about 2 minutes because they need to wrap this up, apparently. So, bottom line, like, this will be a short snap judgments, but there's not a lot to complain about, but there's enough to give you something to work on, I think, is the best way I can view it.
Yeah. The story of the day for me overall, Carnell Tate coming back to Chicago, the emotion for him, 27 friends and family members in Wrigley Field. You could see, Brian Hartline wanting to, huge embrace for him afterwards, everything that's gone into the last couple of years. He had a sensational touchdown catch there on the end of that drive that we talked about from Will Howard, diving into the end zone, had another one to start the third quarter to really put the game away. Carnell Tate, what more can you say? It's an incredible story. He's an incredible kid, young man, and Ohio State wanted to give back to him, and he delivered.
It's funny. We go back to his recruitment and this idea that he was some diva of a wide receiver, and he is an absolute workman. Like, he is Terry McLaurin-esque. It just comes out, does the work, doesn't talk, and you have to appreciate kids like that. And you're glad for. You saw. I mean, I was in that corner of the end zone with the Ohio State photographer, videographer, and they're like, "We got to get Carnell's touchdown." I'm like, "It's coming right here." And then it was the next play. Like, they had man coverage over there, and they took a shot, and it was good to see the Buckeyes push the ball down the field today. I think Will Howard was probably his least accurate he's been all year. Something to keep an eye on, but again, not a lot to complain about. But there's plenty to work on heading into a top 5 matchup at home at noon next week on Fox.
When he had to be, he put the ball where it needed to be on that drive.
That G. Scott pass.
The G. Scott throw was incredible. Hits Carnell Tate. Very nearly had the touchdown right here to Jeremiah Smith. And I will say, before that Wrigley Field kicks us out, after I said all these nice things about them pulling off the game, Jeremiah Smith had that ankle pretty significantly covered in ice as he hobbled out here. I don't want to put it in that. He was limping and seemed to be in pain. Northwestern twisted that ankle of his on that 68-yard catch. He did stay in the game, played at least a couple more snaps, and got the football again. But that's going to be the thing to watch in the days ahead for Ohio State as they get ready.
That certainly looked on purpose.
Yeah, it did.
And dirty.
It didn't look clean. It had nothing to do with the field. It just had a lot to do with Northwestern itself. So I didn't think that was very cool or very sportsmanlike. But everything else for this weekend came off without a hitch for Ohio State. Again, give them credit for that. Kudos. So you'll see that as well. So Berm does have some footage of that. That's on the notebook. We have some interviews with players that were made available to the notebook as well. So that's going to be up on the podcast later. And Berm's got some footage there of Jeremiah Smith. So he and G. Scott will be the only ones, I think, really to watch in terms of injuries for Ohio State going into next week. Buckeyes hoping to get Will Kazmarek back. That's covering those bases. And we're going to get off the base paths here at Wrigley Field. Ohio State wins 31-7. No sweat, no drama. An easy win, and to set the table for Indiana, Michigan, and potentially Oregon after that if the Buckeyes can handle their business. Thanks for joining us for Snap Judgments. Hope you've had a great weekend. If you were down here and said hello, we appreciate you guys watching the podcast and Snap Judgments. He's Berm. I'm Austin. So long.